Hi everyone, Mega Shorts here, bringing you another Doctor Who 5-inch scale action figure review. And in this review we're going to be taking a look at one of the brand new B&M Exclusive collector sets, and this is the 11th Doctor set. Now this particular set is a re-release of the set that came out in the summer of last year. They've also re-released the other two figure sets that were released in the summer of last year, and I'm really pleased to see that they've done that, because unfortunately, even though I've been able to get loads of the B&M Exclusive Doctor Who figure sets in the past, for some reason last year I couldn't find any of them. They seem to be popular more so than ever before, and they just went flying off the shelves. I'm not actually sure whether my local stores even stock them, so I'm really pleased that I've managed to get this new re-release. There are some differences between this set and the original version, and I'll get into those very shortly. So the packaging for this set is pretty much the same as it has been for all the other figures in this series. At the bottom left of the front we get a classic Doctor Who logo. Next to that we get the name of the set and the names of the figures. On the sides we get some pictures of the figures along with their names and the classic Doctor Who logo once again. On the back we get the Doctor Who logo once again, along with some more pictures of the figures. Then at the bottom we have the same usual product and company information. So as far as differences between this set and the original version go, it seems like the Amy and Oswin Oswald figures are the only two that have differences. The 11th Doctor figure appears to be exactly the same. So with the Amy figure this time, the shirt is white instead of pink, and this is to make it a little bit more accurate to her appearance in the Series 6 episode Let's Kill Hitler. And the Oswin Oswald figure no longer comes with the tool belt accessory. Aside from that, these figures are more or less the same as the original release, probably not different to the point where I can imagine people that got the original version of this set will get this one. But for someone like me who missed out on the original version of this set and also doesn't have the original versions of this 11th Doctor variant and the Oswin Oswald figure, it's a great set to now have in the collection. Okay, so the first figure we're going to take a look at is the 11th Doctor figure. Now, this particular variant is a repaint of the version from the Impossible set, which came out in late 2014. The costume is much darker this time, especially on the jacket, and the head sculpt is from the Series 6 11th Doctor figures from late 2011, rather than the original hatted head sculpt from the original version. And when we put the new release next to the original Series 6 11th Doctor figure, we can see that there are a few paint differences in the head sculpts of these two variants. The skin tone on the new version is a little bit lighter, the eyes have been painted a little bit darker, and the hair is much darker this time with less brown shading. Now personally, I didn't have any problems with the original Series 6 11th Doctor figure head sculpt, but I do quite like the changes they've made for the new version. And in general, I think this is a really nice head sculpt. It's got a really good likeness to Matt Smith, and the facial features have been painted really nicely. To be honest, I'm surprised that we haven't seen the original 11th Doctor figure head sculpt from Series 5 reused a bit more. Since late 2011, when the Series 6 11th Doctor figures came out, any that have reused head sculpts since then have pretty much always had this head sculpt. And don't get me wrong, I do think this is a good head sculpt, but I do really like the original Series 5 11th Doctor figure head sculpt as well. So it'd be nice to see that particular sculpt used again for the future. But that's not to say that I hate this one. I still think this one is pretty good. So the costume for this figure is quite a bit different to the costumes of many of the previous 11th Doctor figures. I have to say, I think this is so much better with the darker paint for the jacket, makes it much more accurate. The jacket has also got some really nice sculpted detail on it, like the big black buttons, the fur lining on the sides here, which has been sculpted and painted really well. You can actually feel the texturing of it as well. Not really much to say about the rest of it really. You've got some black ends towards the ends of the sleeves there, a couple of pockets on the sides, and there's also some creases on the back. And to be honest, even though this isn't the long-awaited green coat variant from Series 6 Part 2, I think this figure is really, really good, and they've really captured the colours and detail of this particular costume really well, especially with this particular release. Then taking a closer look at the shirt, we can see that even though this is only a small part of the figure, it has been painted really nicely with grey and some very small pink stripes over the top. The tie has also been painted really well on the sculpt on top of that as well. I really like the waistcoat on this figure, even though, again, like the shirt is only a small part of the figure. They've done a great job with the detail of the gold buttons, and especially with the fob watch as well, where you can actually see all the individual parts of the metal. The trousers are lifted directly from the original 11th Doctor figures from 2010, so the sculpted detail is exactly the same. You've got the button near the top, the creases going all the way down from the top to the bottom. You can also see some of the stitching on the sides there. The boots are pretty nice as well. They've been painted with a slightly darker brown to the trousers, but you can see a little bit of shading on them, and they have also got some nicely sculpted bits of detail on the sides of them there. And like many of the other figures that were released during the Matt Smith era, and I believe in the David Tennant era, he does have a peg hole under the feet, so it does seem like this figure was made for a display stand, which we've never had for the 5-inch scale figures, so I hope that's something that we eventually see with the 5.5-inch scale collector series, as even though a lot of these figures do stand really nicely by themselves, it would be nice to have a display stand with them so we can have them stand on our collection shelves a bit more easily and allow for some more posing. Now, the articulation on this figure is exactly the same as it was for the Series 6 11th Doctor figures from late 2011. The head has the standard swivel joint where it can swivel just a little bit. The arms have ball joints at the shoulders where they can move outwards and inwards quite nicely, making them perfect for some regeneration poses. They also have swivel joints just above the biceps where they can turn all the way round. The arms have the usual elbow joints as well as the nicely hidden joints at the wrists. There's also a waist joint just at the bottom of the waistcoat above the trousers. The legs can move outwards from the top from the hinge joints, but the coat does limit the movement somewhat. They can move backwards and forwards from the waist. There's a swivel joint just around the thighs there, and the legs can also bend at the knees. Overall, I think this is a really nice new variant of the 11th Doctor. Sadly, I never got the original Impossible set, and I probably still could, but this figure is definitely a vast improvement over that version with the darker paintwork for the costume. The sculpted detail is absolutely superb, and the paintwork complements it really well, especially with the buttons and the fob watch on the waistcoat, which are absolutely tiny but have been painted absolutely brilliantly. I think the articulation on this figure is absolutely superb as well. It's pretty much the most that we've ever got on a 11th Doctor figure, and it's definitely a lot more than what we got on the Series 5 variants as well. Would be nice to see character utilising some new articulation for future variants of this Doctor and other Doctors from the past series. I'd love to see an 11th Doctor figure using the hinge joint for the neck like what we saw on the new 13th Doctor figure. Now, I understand these sets are primarily just tweaked or repainted figures from the past, and this figure, the way it is just absolutely fine. So from me, this particular variant of the 11th Doctor from the 2012 Christmas special, The Snowmen, gets a very well-earned 10 out of 10. Okay, so here we have the new Amy Pond variant stood next to the original Amy Pond figure, which was based on her appearance in Victory of the Daleks and some of the early Series 5 trailers from 2010. This particular variant is based on her appearance in the Series 6 episode Let's Kill Hitler, and we can see that this particular variant is just a repaint of the original figure. Most of the differences are within the costume, but something I didn't realise about these two variants until I got this particular set is that there are some differences within the head sculpt and other parts of the figure as well. We can see that the new variant has much darker hair than the original version. The skin tone is a little bit darker on the new variant, and the facial features have been painted a bit differently as well. The same can be said for the arms, which have been painted exactly the same. And taking a closer look at the head sculpt, I wouldn't say that the original head sculpt was in dire need of changing for the paintwork, but I really like the changes that they have made. The hair certainly looks a lot more neat in terms of the paintwork this time. It's got all the same nice sculpting. It's just nice to see it without the shading on the original figure, which was a little bit sloppy in some places, but on this one it's a lot more consistent. The facial features have been painted really well, and overall it does have a pretty decent likeness to Karen Gillan. I wouldn't say it's a spot-on likeness, but you can tell that it is definitely meant to be based on her. Now, even though the jacket may not be as accurate as it could be, given that it is using an an existing sculpt of a figure based on another episode. I still think it's turned out really well. I absolutely love the way it's been painted with that light blue with the brown shading over the top, which really does help to give it a quite realistic denim effect. The sculpted creases are also really nice. You can see quite a lot of them on the back there, and I really like these little tiny bits of lining that you can see at the bottom of it there. There are also some pockets. There's one on the side there and you can see the zip of it, and there's another one just on the other side there. And then taking a look at the shirts now, we can see that she has got two like she did in the episode. There's the white one and then the smaller one on the top. Both of these have all been done as part of the same sculpt within the paintwork, and for the most part they've been done quite well. The paintwork on the smaller one has been done okay, the lining has turned out quite nicely, and to be honest I would have been fine with it if it didn't have those patterns on it, if it was just sort of that plain creamy colour, but it is a nice little bit of additional detail, and I'm pleased to see the character changed the white shirt from being pink with the original release, so it is a little bit more accurate this time around. The belt on top of the skirt has been painted a little bit differently. The silver buckle and the buttons are exactly the same. It's just the main part of the belt with the brown is a little bit darker this time, and the other brown features are a little bit lighter this time. For the most part it has been painted quite well, but you can see that just along the sides there are a few little paint errors there where there's a little bit of blue on them. And the skirt, there's not really much to say about that really. It's got all the sculpted detail that it has on the original obviously, but it's just dark blue instead of light grey blue this time. So there's a few creases on the front and the back, and there's also a couple of pockets on it. Not really much to say about the tights because they're just painted orange. There's not any creases on them, but there doesn't really need to be. And the boots have turned out quite well. Again, all the same sculpted detail from the original figure is present, but they are painted differently this time with more of a sort of turquoise colour to them. I think that's the right one, sort of a greeny blue. I have got some really nice sculpted detail there, and the shading of the sort of blue or turquoise, like I said, really helps to make it stand out a bit more. And like the 11th Doctor figure, she's also got a peg hole for a non-existing display stand, seemingly. Now, given that this figure is just a repaint, it retains exactly the same articulation as the original Amy Pond figure. The head can go from side to side a little bit, but the hair does limit the movement quite a bit. The arms can go all the way round from the shoulders. There's the usual swivel joint just above the biceps. The arms can also bend up and down at the elbows, and instead of a wrist swivel joint, there is a swivel joint just below the elbows, which I think is really nice, because if they were to give this figure the usual wrist swivel joints, it would probably stick up like a sore thumb on this arm, but just about okay on that one because it's got the little watch there. So I think it's nice that they've utilised a joint that can be hidden as part of the sculpt a little bit better. There was a waist joint on the original one where this figure could move from side to side and all the way around, but as you can see on this one, it doesn't seem to want to move. I'm not sure if they've intentionally taken that point of articulation away. Now, because of the skirt, the leg movement is very limited, but there is still articulation where you can move the legs outwards and inwards a little bit. They can move backwards and forwards from the hips just a little bit, and they can also bend at the knees. So even though this figure may not be as accurate as it could be, I'm really happy that we've been given a new Amy Pond variant with this set, rather than an unchanged re-release of the original figure from Victory of the Daleks. The existing sculpt is very detailed, and the paintwork does certainly help to bring some of the additional features from her costume in Let's Kill Hitler onto this variant. It's nice to see that it has also been given that slight update from the original release as well. The articulation is okay. It's not as much as we've perhaps come to expect from some of the more recent Doctor Who 5-inch scale action figures, but it is a lot more than what we got on some of the very original figures, and I'm still happy with it just the way it is. So from me, the Amy Pond variant from Let's Kill Hitler gets a very well a 9 out of 10. For the most part, this figure is a pretty decent repaint of the original, not 100% accurate, but they've done really well with the paintwork, and I like the changes that they've made to the head sculpt, and the articulation is pretty good as well. Like the Amy Pond figure, the Oswin Oswald figure is also a repaint. The hair is a much darker brown than it is on the original release, and the red of the costume is also darker this time around. However, unlike both of the previous releases of this figure, the other one being from the previous release of this set and the very first being from the Impossible set, this one does not feature the tool belt accessory. And taking a closer look at the head sculpt, I have to say I think this has got a really good likeness to Jenna Coleman. I think out of all the figures in this set, this one has the best likeness to the actor that they are based on. I wouldn't say the hair needs to be changed really. It's not like it's massively inaccurate now. There were scenes in Asylum of the Daleks where her hair did look dark, and then there was some where she'd obviously be stood in a brighter light and it would look more light brown like the original figure. So it's not something that I think needed to be changed, but sort of all the same, I'm not really gonna complain about that until the end of time. So yeah, it's a change that I didn't really expect, nor did I think was needed, but it's not one that I'm gonna let ruin my view of the figure really. The facial features have been painted quite nicely. There's just a slight problem on my one in that one of the pupils is facing a little bit lower than the other, and there's just something about the facial paintwork that I think is letting the likeness down a bit. It still really does look like Jenna Coleman to me. I just think there's something about it that could have been a bit different that I can't quite put my finger on, unfortunately. And the costume, just like it was in Asylum of the Daleks, is pretty simple. There's not really all that much to it. It's just basically this one red top or dress and the sort of Converse trainers. I think they're Converse trainers, might not be right on that one. But yeah, as far as the sculpting of the main part of the clothing goes, there's just pretty much creases on it. There isn't really much else to say about it really. It's just solid red paint and not much else really. But it is, again, a little bit darker than it was on the original release, and I think that is a nice little improvement there. You can see that she has also got the nice bit of sculpted detail in the form of her wristwatch on her left hand there. And then moving down to her shoes or boots, you can see that these actually have more sculpted detail and paintwork than the main part of the costume. For the most part, they are just a light red, but you have got the really nicely painted white laces on top of that, as well as some brown or darker red features, and you've also got the white undersides as well. So for articulation, the head can go from side to side, but it is very limited in movement because of the hair, just like on the Amy Pond figure. The arms have the usual swivel joints from the shoulders, as well as ball joints where they can go outwards and inwards. The arms also have the usual bicep swivel joints where they can turn all the way around. There's another swivel joint just around the elbow where they can move up and down as well. Now, she hasn't got a waist swivel joint, but the legs can move backwards and forwards from the waist quite nicely because the dress is made out of a really soft material. Kind of wish they actually utilised this material on the Amy Pond figures, because the more solid material of the skirts on the Amy Pond figures does make the legs much harder to move, and you definitely get a lot more range of motion out of the Oswin Oswald figure. The legs also have a swivel joint just above the thighs where they can swivel all the way around. The knees also have the usual hinge joint, and the shoes can also turn 360 degrees at a swivel joint. Given that the Oswin Oswald figure has only been released a couple of times before, it's nice to see this figure as part of one of these sets, especially seeing as I still don't have the original version from the Impossible set. The likeness to Jenna Coleman in the head sculpt is easily one of the best things about this figure, and the costume, even though it's plain and simple, has been presented quite nicely as well. The sculpted detail on it is really good, and the paintwork on the shoes is great. My only problem with this figure, aside from the paintwork of the facial features, is that the tool belt isn't included. Given that she had it on throughout her one and only appearance in Asylum of the Daleks, it is a shame not to see it with the second run of these sets, especially for collectors like me who didn't get the original version. So it's a shame that even though we've got one figure in this set that has been improved with the paintwork, it's a shame to see a figure that's been changed in that something from it is missing. So even though I do really like this figure for the sculpt and the articulation, I am a bit disappointed with it in that it doesn't come with the tool belt accessory. But still, this is a nice figure, happy to see it as part of this set, so from me it gets a very well earned 9 out of 10. So overall, I think the 2019 B&M Exclusive 11th Doctor Collector set is a great addition to my collection. The Matt Smith era was one of my favourite parts of the new series, and it's great to have 2 new variants of the 11th Doctor and Amy, plus the Oswin Oswald figure was a much needed re-release for me. The 11th Doctor figure is my personal favourite out of the bunch, even though I'm still eagerly waiting a long green coat variant from Series 6 Part 2. This is still a really good variant and it's got some fantastic sculpted detail and articulation. The Amy figure is a decent repaint of the original figure. It may not be 100% accurate, but it's nice to have this variant anyway, and it's nice to have one to go with our Series 6 figures. The Oswin Oswald figure is pretty good. It's got a great likeness to Jenna Coleman, and the sculpt for the most part is pretty good. I just think the paintwork in some places and the lack of tool belt accessory let it down a little bit, but it's still a really nice figure nonetheless. And from me, the B&M Exclusive 2019 11th Doctor Collector set gets a 9 out of 10. This is a really good set that I definitely recommend to you, especially if you've only just recently started collecting the 5-inch scale Doctor Who action figures, or if you're someone like me who may have missed out on some or all of the previous variants of these figures. It's just my only problems with this set come with the fact that the Oswin Oswald figure no longer features the tool belt accessory, and I would have liked this set a tiny bit more if it had a sonic screwdriver accessory for the 11th Doctor figure, because even though I've already got most of the 11th Doctor figures so far, this set would have definitely been a little bit better for new collectors if it did have that as well. So yeah, that is pretty much it for my review of the 11th Doctor figure collector set. Hope you've all enjoyed watching this review. If you want to share your thoughts on these figures, you can do so in the comment section below. And my next Doctor Who action figure review will be of the 12th Doctor collector set from this year. Thanks for watching this review, guys, and I will see you again soon.